All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible constitutional showdowns you've probably never heard of. We're talking about a battle that put a hugely powerful prime minister on a collision course with the Supreme Court, and in the process, totally redefined the balance of power in the world's biggest democracy.
So let's just cut right to the chase with one simple, massive question. Is it even possible for a nation's highest court to just invalidate the election of its most powerful leader? You know, a sitting prime minister? It sounds like the plot of a movie, right?
Well, it's not. This actually happened. In 1975, the Supreme Court of India did that exact thing, and it kicked off a constitutional crisis that shook the very foundations of the nation's democracy. Okay, so let's set the stage. The case was Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narain, and the verdict that came down was an absolute bombshell. The court found the prime minister's own election to parliament was null and void. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just some dusty legal ruling. This was a political earthquake, plain and simple. The judiciary had, in effect, unseated the leader of the entire country, and that move sent shockwaves through the whole system.
So you got to ask, how on earth could a court even make a decision that huge? Well, they had a powerful and at the time pretty new tool in their back pocket, a concept known as the Basic Structure Doctrine.
This idea came out of a landmark case just a couple of years earlier, in 1973, and the doctrine itself is actually pretty simple, but it is incredibly profound. It says, sure, Parliament can change the Constitution, but there's a line it can't cross. It can't damage its soul. It can't destroy the core essential features that make the Constitution what it is.
So what this case really did was bring a huge philosophical conflict to a head. On one side, you've got this idea of parliamentary sovereignty, that the elected representatives of the people should have the final say. And on the other, you have constitutional supremacy, the idea that the Constitution is the highest law of the land, and everyone, including Parliament, has to follow it. This case became the ultimate battleground between these two big ideas.
So what exactly are these sacred basic features? Well, the court never gave a final, exhaustive list, but it did lay out some of the key pillars. Things like, the Constitution being supreme, having a democratic government, the separation of powers between different branches, and, really important for our story, judicial review. That's the power of courts to check the government's actions, and the absolute bedrock principle of free and fair elections. So as you can imagine, this verdict landed like a bomb. And the government's response was, well, it was dramatic. Faced with this ruling, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's government didn't just respond with legal arguments. It responded with overwhelming political force. And just look at how fast everything happened. It's really kind of breathtaking. The court verdict comes down on June 12th. Not even 2 weeks later, a national emergency is declared across the country, which suspended a lot of basic rights. And then by August, Parliament passes a whole new constitutional amendment specifically designed to make this legal problem just go away.
Yeah, this wasn't some subtle, clever legal move. It was a straight-up power play. The 39th Amendment was a direct counterattack, and its goal couldn't have been clearer. Validate the Prime Minister's election after the fact, and, this is the big one, make sure no court could ever again question the election of top officials like the PM.
So now we get to the real nail-biter moment. The government had literally changed the Constitution to win the case. The question was, would the Supreme Court just accept it? Would they just roll over?
In this incredible moment of judicial defiance, the court's answer was a resounding no. It took that basic structure doctrine and, for the very first time, used it to strike down a constitutional amendment. This was a direct, jaw-dropping assertion of judicial power against Parliament.
And the court's reasoning was actually really clear and powerful. It said this new amendment violates two of the most fundamental pillars of the Constitution. First, by just declaring an election valid, it tramples all over the principle of free and fair elections. And second, by telling the court it couldn't even hear the case, it was a direct attack on judicial review. Basically, the court said, look, Parliament, you can't be the player and the umpire in your own game.
But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The government pushed back hard. During the emergency, it passed the massive 42nd Amendment, and this was basically an attempt to end the argument for good. It literally wrote into the Constitution that Parliament's power to amend it was absolute and had, and this is a quote, no limitation whatever.
And this is where we get the final checkmate, in a 1980 case called Minerva Mills. The court struck down those new clauses with this just beautiful piece of legal logic. It ruled that the power to amend the Constitution is by its very nature a limited power. Therefore, Parliament can't use its limited power to give itself unlimited power. And that decision cemented the Basic Structure Doctrine as the supreme law of the land.
Okay, so why are we talking about a legal battle from nearly 50 years ago? Well, because its legacy defines the very balance of power in India to this day, and honestly, it holds lessons for democracies all over the world.
Think of the doctrine like a constitutional firewall. It's this crucial safeguard that makes sure that no matter how big a majority a government has, it can't use that temporary political power to permanently tear down the fundamental principles of the nation. Things like democracy, liberty, and basic rights.
And this isn't just some dusty old historical artifact. Its relevance is felt right now. As recently as 2023, India's current Chief Justice called the doctrine a North Star. It's the guiding light that helps judges navigate the trickiest constitutional waters, making sure the country doesn't lose its way. But this entire incredible story leaves us wrestling with a really deep and timeless question. If the court has the final say on what the Constitution means, even over the people's elected representatives, well, then who guards the guardians? Who checks the power of the court? It's that delicate balancing act that every single democracy has to keep navigating every single day.